We're very live today. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Watch out, Dave. So we've been talking about different kinds of food. Last week, what did we talk about? I gotta remember. We talked about fresh fruit, right? Fruit and vegetables. This week, we're going to talk about comfort food. What is comfort food? Well, before we start naming types, what is comfort food? When would you eat comfort food? Hearty meals that make you feel good. That's kind of the key part there, right? It makes you feel good. Maybe it's not so healthy for you. It depends on what kind of comfort food we're talking about. But it makes you feel good. So what are some people's favorite comfort food? Candy, ice cream.
Macaroni and cheese.
Macaroni and cheese. I like that one. What's that? Pie. Cake. Bread. Brownies. Karen, you're raising your hand back there.
Yes, it's Janet's chocolate cake.
Yes, remember here in the back, Janet, wave hello. She makes a very delicious chocolate cake. But she doesn't eat it herself, so I hear. You don't like chocolate, right, Janet?
I'm not big on it.
There you go. So it's truly a gift for others. She makes this just for other people to enjoy. Anybody else have comfort food that they really like?
Meatloaf, mashed potatoes with gravy.
There we go. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes and gravy. Troy.
Reese's peanut butter cups.
Reese's peanut butter cups. He's addicted to them. Is that true, Janet? Yes, it is. No doubt. So when do we eat comfort food? When you're feeling down, when you're feeling depressed, right? Stressed. Usually it's kind of a minor stress, right? You had a bad day, you had a bad week, things have not been going your way, maybe you had a fight with somebody, and you have some comfort food, it makes you feel a little better. But there are times in our life when we are so overwhelmed by what's going on that we can't even think about food. That happens too, right? And this is where Elijah is in today's reading. His name wasn't mentioned. The he in our first reading is Elijah. And Elijah was a very well-known prophet of God's people. And we hear about him in the Old Testament. And Elijah, in this particular reading, he's just come off of a very interesting situation. So right before this reading, Elijah has a contest with the priests of Baal. Now, who is Baal? Anybody know? An idol, right? He's another god in that time period when Elijah was living. And when Elijah was living, when he was a prophet, the people of Israel, God's people, many of them worshipped Baal. Because the queen at that time was from another country, and in her country they worshipped Baal. So she enforced worship of this other god. And so Elijah is kind of up against everybody else, trying to convince them to worship the God of Israel. So one of the ways he does this is he has a contest with the priests of Baal. And the contest is that they're going to both sacrifice something for their God, and then they're going to cry out to their God, and whoever's God responds and lights the sacrifice on fire, that's the true God. So they both sacrifice an animal, and they place it on top of wood, and the priests of Baal, they go first. So they cry out to the God of Baal, and nothing happens. The sacrifice just sits there on top of the wood. And they make a lot of show trying to get Baal's attention, and yet still nothing happens. And then it's Elijah's turn, right? And he has to sacrifice too, an animal that he's killed, and he places it on top of the wood. And Elijah has a flair for the dramatic. So he has somebody come and pour water over top of the sacrifice and on top of the wood until it's drenched. And he says, you see this? It's all wet, right? And then he calls out to the God of Israel, right? And what happens? Whoosh! A huge fire, right? And it's all consumed in like a moment. So clearly Elijah has won the contest, right? And then after this contest, he does something which sounds a little not so great to us. After the contest, he kills the priests of Baal, right? So, he's just won a victory. And yet, right afterwards, the Queen Jezebel is her name, she hears about this, And she threatens Elijah, and she says that she's going to do to him what he did to the priest of Baal. And this is what happens just before our reading. So Elijah hears this, that his life is being threatened by the queen, and he goes into the wilderness, and he lies down, and he essentially is ready to give up. He says, God, just take my life. I'm done. It's too much for me. I'm too overwhelmed. I can't do it anymore. And he just lies there, right? And so what does God do in this moment when Elijah is just ready to give up and overwhelmed?
Buys him some food.
Buys him some food. So he sends a particular person. Who's that? An angel, right? An angel is another word for a messenger from God. So a messenger from God comes, and the messenger has food. What kind of food? Meatloaf and mashed potatoes? Bread, yeah. So it says a cake, but essentially what that means is bread. It's like a little piece of bread. So it's a little piece of bread and some water. Not really extravagant food, if you think about it. But when you're really overwhelmed by everything, and you just can't even think straight, do you really want extravagant food? No, not really. No, so it's just the basics. Just enough to get him through that day, right? And then the next day, what happens? Close. There was one more day in between there. Right, he rests, and then the angel comes back and gives him another meal, bread and water. So I want you to think about times in your life when you were overwhelmed. And who came to you? What was a time in your life when you were just too overwhelmed to even think about making food? When does this happen in our lives?
When you're grieving.
When you're grieving, absolutely. Often after somebody's just lost someone that's dear to them, people will bring them food, right? When's another time that we reach out to folks when we know they're just so overwhelmed they can't even think about food? When they're sick, yes. Absolutely. That happened to me when I had surgery when I was a teenager, and my parents were just consumed with taking care of me. After I'd come home from the hospital, people brought us food to eat. What's another time?
When there's a major change in your life, perhaps you're just like a child.
Yes, yeah, when you have a major change. So for example, when you have a baby, that's pretty overwhelming. Maybe not sad, but overwhelming, certainly. And that's another time when people can come and bring you food, and it helps, yeah. So there's a congregation in Missouri who's made a ministry out of being angels, like the angel that came to Elijah. And this ministry started when a particular woman who's a member of this congregation, I think her name is Christy, she had foot surgery. And she couldn't get around, she couldn't cook for herself, so the members of the congregation brought her meals while she was recovering. And after she had recovered from her foot surgery, she thought about, what about all those folks who don't have a congregation or don't have a community that can surround them with support in times like this? How can we as a congregation perhaps help them? And so out of this idea came a ministry, and we're going to watch a little video about this ministry. It's called Meals Do Matter. So the video is about 3 minutes long, and it's going to show folks who are participating in the ministry and talking about what it means to them.
The true mission of Meals Do Matter is being the hands and feet of Christ and letting other people in the world know that they matter to us.
It takes care of a need that isn't always available. The meals are ready to go at a moment's notice to grab and take to someone in need.
We care a lot about them, and that we want to make their lives easier when they're struggling. And that's the purpose of Meals Do Matter.
Yes, I met one of my best friends when she was first pregnant, and I brought her a meal. I never known her before, and she was due, and lo and behold, she's my friend now.
To help out, be a part of the organization, and feel like we're contributing to help those who are in need.
I'm here to help create a bunch of meals for people who are either in need for, they had surgery or they just had a baby or things are just really rough right now. To help them through difficult times, to let them know they're loved, they're cared about, people are thinking about them, just to make it one less thing they have to worry about during their day.
And Elisa invited us to come up, and we thought this would be a great thing to do and have our kids come with us and do a little bit to give back.
Yes, I have delivered many a meal out of the freezer to family and friends who have desperately needed it, and it's come in very, very helpful for them.
There, I received a meal when I had my third son. It was so helpful. We received lasagna, and it was back at a time when we had our third baby. We were really busy, and it was so wonderful to just be able to put the lasagna in the oven and have it ready. It was so useful.
Everyone has been so grateful, not just to the program, but to the members of Trinity.
What's really neat is to see over the years it started small, and we had one little freezer. Now we have 2 freezers, and in the beginning it took 3-4 months to get the meals out. Now with 2 freezers, after 2 months, they're empty. So it's really growing. So I think there's nothing but growth as we move forward.
Delivering meals is really important. Making the meals is always easy and fun. Delivering the meals sometimes gets to be harder. So taking a meal, bringing the meal to someone, and that's the most, important part of the ministry, isn't it?
We love serving and meals do matter. Meals do
So what did you notice about this ministry? What impact did it have on the congregation? What did people say that it meant to them?
It enriched their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. It brought meaning to them. Yeah. The one lady talked about, she had now as a best friend from having delivered meals to her. How about for the folks who received meals?
They paid it forward, and they paid it forward and they began to volunteer as well.
Yeah, so the one woman on there had received a meal when she just had a baby, and now she's involved in the ministry. Absolutely. Anything else that struck you from this video?
Helps carry the burden, like even if it's a good thing, like the woman that had the baby, she still had 3 kids and was overwhelmed, but it helps just, like, you're not alone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, what's your name? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Sabrina.
Sabrina. So Sabrina just said that it helps you feel like you're not alone. So maybe it's not a terrible thing because, having a baby often brings joy. But you're just overwhelmed, and this helps you to see that you're not alone when you're in this time of being overwhelmed. That's what the angel did for Elijah. Showed him that he wasn't alone. He felt like he was completely alone in his country where everybody was following the God of Baal. And yet God sent the angel and showed him that God was with him. And that's what these kind of meals do when folks are overwhelmed in their own lives, whether they're sick or they've had a baby or they've just been in the hospital or someone close to them has died. When somebody brings a meal, it shows somebody's thinking about you. In our gospel today, Jesus says that he's the bread of life. And the crowds last week were excited about Jesus being the bread of life. They wanted to partake in this bread of life that would help them to live forever, to never be thirsty or hungry again. But this week, they start to get a little skeptical. Why are they skeptical? Terry.
It says he's the bread that came down from heaven, and the Jewish leaders or whatever are saying, well, you came from your father and mother, Joseph and Mary, like, what are you talking about?
Right. So they know Jesus just as another guy. He's been part of a neighborhood. They know that his father and mother. How can he be somebody who has come down from heaven? And yet we know differently, don't we? How does Jesus become the meal that we need? How does Jesus become bread of life that helps us through?
He sacrificed himself.
Absolutely. He says in the reading that his flesh will become the bread. that we eat. When do we eat Jesus? Communion. There we go. So in communion, we receive, just kind of like Elijah does from the angel, we receive a little bit of bread, a little bit of wine. It's not an extravagant amount. You wouldn't make it a meal. It wouldn't replace breakfast. But it gives us the presence of God, just like the angel with the bread and the water gave Elijah the presence of God. The presence of God is in that bread and in that wine. And it helps to give us the energy, the grace, the forgiveness, the love that we need to make it through. And that's partially why we have it every week. For a long time here at St. John's, we had it twice a month. But in the past year, we started having communion every week. And part of the reason that we do that is because we never know when somebody's going to come through this door and they're going to need that bread and that wine because they're going through something overwhelming and they just need the presence of God to help them through that time. And that's why we always have it here available, the bread and the wine, so that folks can have it and feel the presence of God and the love of God and make it through whatever they're going through.